Hi there, everyone. This is my very first YouTube video. I will be showing you some ignition switch problems and what sort of symptoms the ignition switch problems will cause, and what a lot of people take into, they might think it's your grounds, your pump, all that stuff. I went through a lot to find out it was just a small thing, so I just want to make sure everybody else who's going through the same thing or kind of the same thing, they can find it faster, because I could not find any videos on this at all. So the problems that I'm having today right now is that when I turn my key on to the run position, this one, I would turn it on, I would have a indicator light here, and that was it. There was nothing else. My battery was fully charged. There was nothing wrong with it. It was great. So a lot of people had mentioned that it was my grounds. So I went through the whole ground situation, did all the grounds, did all that fun stuff. Did nothing. It changed absolutely nothing. I also had realized that when I turned the key on, nothing was happening. There was no ECM, there was no computer, there was nothing turning on. No spark plug, no fuel pump, none of that fun stuff. So I then double checked to make sure I was right. So I went back to the fuel pump. I checked the voltage at the fuel pump, and I was only getting about 0.3 of a volt. Went up to the relay, found out that I was getting the full 12.3, between 12.4 volts that I was needed. So I then started to troubleshoot a little bit more, and I heard a couple things about ignition switch problems, but none of them were my issue, where there was absolutely no start. There was intermediate no starts that I kept finding, or the truck would sometimes, you'd have to turn the key, go like this, 1 2 3, and then eventually the truck would come on because it wouldn't work properly. So I then went in and found my wiring diagram for my ignition switch here. I went in, checked everything out, and I found out what wires were supposed to be live with ignition on, ignition off. And it turns out that inside this bad boy, you've got all these funky little wires in here. This is your ignition switch here. So all of my wires normally were getting between 0 to 12.3 volts. 0 being ignition off, and then 12.3 volts, between 12.3 and 12.4 with ignition on, which was what I was supposed to be having throughout most of these. Now this little funky bad boy here, this pink boy, it was only getting about 0.3 of a volt to ignition off. With ignition on, sorry. Ignition off, it was 0 volts, but ignition on, it was 0.3 of a volt, which was not right. So I then traced up underneath here. I did have a security system in the truck when I purchased it, and I did have a suspicion that it might have been it. So that is these wires here snipped. That was me doing this. It wasn't somebody else. I didn't want to have that be the failure and me be doing it wrong. So I then took out the security system with no issues. There was nothing there. Just did a couple clips there, and I went through. The truck is also wired in for bags terribly, but I clipped all the wires out because I was zeroing everything out. I did not need one thing screwing me up. So I then started to look into this. Now, most of the wires that came from the old one, which is dangling here, as you can see, this is the old one. They're looking old. This truck has almost 370,000 K on it. It's starting to show its time of wear, which also led me to believe it might have been this as well, because of the mileage and the guy saying, it might never have been changed. So I went and replaced this bad boy, and as soon as I replaced it, my funky little issue disappeared. Now, once this is in the truck, you got to put the key into the actual ignition and turn it. But I'll just show you now, because I actually, when I would initially, sorry, you're just going to be sitting here for a hot second. When I would initially turn my key on, that's all I was getting. I was getting that light. And then I would turn the key on to the run position, and nothing would happen. So as I take this key and I turn it to the run position, this is what a normal vehicle should do. You get all your dash lights, you get all that crazy stuff. I wasn't getting any of that when I turned my key on. All I was getting was that initial, just the initial light on, and then nothing after that. Now, I picked this truck up for extremely dirt cheap because of this problem. And now that I've showed you kind of what I've done, I'll explain to you what the story was before I bought the truck. An old farmer had it, and his son did a fuel pump on it because it died on them out in the field. And this was all just after they replaced the motor, so they were suspicious that the fuel pump was on its way out. So they changed out the fuel pump, and the truck did it again. So they got frustrated with it, and as you can see here, the hood's all dented up here. They got the truck fired up from where it died, and they got all mad and floored it, and the hood come up and crunched it, so it needs to be replaced. But then the guy who got it from them did some farm work for this farmer, and he got it started by, again, throwing a booster pack on it, and that's the only way the truck would start. You didn't have to boost it from a vehicle, it had to be from a booster pack, like an actual pack. On start position, a charger, not a pack. And it had to be on the start position, not charging to the start, and the truck would start. You could disconnect it. I drove the truck all the way home, and, the guy started it there with the charger, but he told me, it had a battery problem. That's all he thought it was. He thought the battery was dead, and that was the first thing. I brought the truck home, and I replaced it next day, and I still had nothing. A lot of people said it was my grounds and stuff. Again, I went through and cleaned every single one of them. It did nothing. Grounds are a very good thing to be cleaning. They're a good thing to be checking. But in my case, it was not grounds. It ended up being my full ignition switch. Another couple issues that people have with the ignition switch as well is that, they'll be cruising down the road and their truck will just die. There will be nothing they've got. It's just dead in the water. Some people say, again, they'll say grounds, blah, blah, blah. Most of the cases that I have found and looked up, they were ignition switch related. So always make sure you're checking your voltage. Use a voltmeter, multimeter, whichever one you have. And that would literally, I probably would have never found my problem if I didn't know how to use that voltmeter and stuff. So I'm really excited that I figured it out and that it's fixed. And I really hope that this helps somebody because, again, I couldn't find anything on ignition switch problems or anything. There are two Torx bolts inside of here. This is the reason why my ignition switch actually isn't back together yet. They need a specific bolt. So this one here, it's called reverse Torx. I don't have them, and I've got to go over to Napa and buy them, but I'm a family man, and I just can't go and buy parts all the time for this thing. So I've had this thing for about a week, and it wasn't, I got it to go here, and that was it. While I'm putting it back together, I'll make a small short tutorial video on how to pull the ignition switch box apart and where it goes into. And let me know if anyone else needs anything on a 96. I can walk you through it. I've gone through all my grounds. I've gone through quite a few things on this. Actually, I still need to do a power steering pump and a couple pulleys on it as well. So those videos will be coming up. I also do have a 03 Volkswagen that my little brother's doing a clutch on. So if anyone needs anything to know on a 03 Volkswagen clutch, or just an 03 Volkswagen, we'll have one of those kicking around for a little bit too. Thanks for watching.